This is Bob again. It's July 2nd. Yesterday, Captain Jack Sparrow and I were over at the Met Council Committee of the Whole meeting. They listened to a presentation of the latest plan for Southwest Light Rail, which includes spending above the $1.65 billion they were trying to cut back to. This is kind of a strange world, the Met Council. One example is that normally for public meetings, the meeting is conducted according to Robert's Rules of Order. And for example, when a meeting is adjourned, the meeting is adjourned, except in this case, when it's not adjourned. I'll give you an example of that and then show some excerpts of clips that were taken during this time. Captain Jack and I were holding up signs calling for a public hearing on this during most of the meeting. Both the other media that was there and the council ignored our call for a public hearing. And in fact, apparently there will be no public hearing before the Met Council takes a final vote on a significant slashing or revision to this plan. That certainly violates the spirit of Minnesota law, which requires things like municipal consent, open meetings, and public participation. Here are the clips followed by a videotape of the presentation to the Met Council Committee of the Whole of the current plan.
And I'm proud of, and I hope other council members are proud of too. So with that, council members, we're adjourned today, and we'll be back. We'll be back next week, Wednesday. Council member Chavez.
Mr. Chair, as far as this matter, I don't have anything further on it. Sure. But I do have something, a recognition moment on behalf of the council members for our Harding Regional Administrator.
All right.
So, if I may.
The floor is yours.
Mr. One, would you like to step up and
Sir, you're adjourned, so I just want to point out, since you're adjourned,
adjourned.
you should hold a public hearing on this.
Please don't interrupt our meeting.
We're
not adjourned yet. You don't interrupt our
But you did
meeting.
say that you were. I've got the videotape of it.
On those other items?
Sure. Councilmember Dorfman.
Dollars for parking, and yet we've chosen, or the committee has chosen to recommend a really pretty significant choice of zeroing out other kinds of inducements to use the service back in if other funds were available for them. Mr. Chair, Craig, what is the quarter-wide budget?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Commerce, what I've got today is a breakdown of the spaces by location in the various different scenarios of the budget. I don't have a breakdown of parking is a space.
I'm actually going to California.
I got that. Yeah. It's good to know.
No public hearing on this?
We'll have a public hearing. We've had lots of public hearings.
Before the vote on this thing, no hearing on it?
All right, have a good fourth. Rivers, close the barge traffic.
Okay, so we're gonna have I did a live shot at 5. I got another one at 6. Okay, cool. Okay, so.
Shouldn't we have a public hearing on this?
Get my good side, Bob. Okay.
Which one is that?
The back.
The back. Okay. Here it is, the good side. No public hearing?
About your leadership, Mark Firm's leadership, Louise on vacation, and Ryan and Jim and everyone else in the project office who wouldn't be here without your hard work, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and council members, and I appreciate those comments. It's been a real team effort. We've had a lot of support and engagement from all of our project partners. We've been expanding upon just simply the cities and counties. And we couldn't have done this in the 9 weeks that we've been working on this to get to this very promising day. Port Management Committee's actions, I think, end up delivering a project that we all can be proud of. So we'll talk a little bit about that here. So all along, as we've been working through this process over the last several weeks, and over a month of time now, we've had 3 goals in mind. We've had a charge of attempting to cut $341 million from a project, essentially getting it back down to the cost estimate of $1.65 billion. Also maintaining our New Star's competitiveness. We've got 6 to 7 other projects in the same portion of the pipeline, and we're all competing for those precious federal dollars, and it's important for us to maintain our high rating that we have now. That's been a major piece of this activity. And then, as I mentioned, a shared sacrifice, but also achieving a consensus. For us to be able to move forward, we needed to have a project that everybody could get behind. And you really saw that come to a head this morning. So what we talked to the Port Management Committee about this morning was 3 different options that they asked us to look at last Wednesday for this Wednesday. And that was a scenario that ended at Southwest Station, but deferred the town center station. That was at the request of the city of Eden Prairie. And then looking at least one alternative at ending at town center, and we came back with 2 for discussion purposes. One at the town center location that was approved by the city through the municipal consent process last year, and then a hybrid option is about 800 feet to the east. Summary, essentially, we wanted to keep as much of an apples-to-apples comparison as one of the requests that was made last week, but we wanted to add some key elements in there. Shady Oak Station parking ride and access was one of the big elements. A Beltline Trail Bridge that's just east of Beltline in St. Louis Park, and Penn Station in Minneapolis, as well as looking at these different ending points. So at a summary level, we looked at 2 town center options that deleted Mitchell and Southwest. The Southwest option deferred town center and then deleted Mitchell as well. Essentially, all 3 scenarios had common elements to them, basically east of the Golden Triangle Station in Eden Prairie. That primarily included the conversion and changes to the parking rides. Some of them were increased, some of them were decreased. Some of them were converted from ramps to lots, and one was converted from a lot to a ramp. We also heard from Eden Prairie last week that if we were going to end at a town center station, they saw a need to have a parking ride at that location that hadn't been previously contemplated. So we worked that into the mix over the last 7 days as well, working very closely with the city of Eden Prairie. All in all, we ended up having scenarios that were relatively comparable to one another. We had ending at town center about 2,600 parking ride spaces, quarter wide, about 2,500 parking ride spaces ending at Southwest Station. All of these numbers are down from approximately 3,600 spaces that we had been previously contemplating. But we still were able to hold on to our high ridership. This line running from Target Field to Mitchell was at 36,000 daily rides. We're still able to maintain a very competitive high ridership project at 33 to 34,000 average daily rides in 2040. We had cost estimates for these various different scenarios that were right around the 341, but most of them were just a notch up from that. But we had incorporated many key elements that folks wanted to see. So going across real quickly here, the town center options that we had on the table, the PE plan location, we had cut up to an amount that left us with about $7 to $34 million above the 1.653 budgets. The Eden Road location got us right around the 1.653, and then the Southwest Station put us at about 63 to 90 million. Which meant we cut about $250 million from the project, which was a pretty significant cut with many different cuts along the corridor from Minneapolis all the way to the Prairie. The good news was any one of these scenarios maintained our New Star's competitiveness with a medium cost effectiveness index, which was key. All of the other projects we were competing with had a medium CDI, and it was very important for us to be able to maintain that medium CDI. Corridor Management Committee recommended today, after seeing those three scenarios, having much careful and considerate deliberation, they recommended to the council that the line end at Southwest Station, that we delete Mitchell Station and Mitchell Park and Ride, that we defer Town Center to a future day, but put in the infrastructure to make it easier to be able to complete that station a few years after ribbon cutting of this line, not too dissimilar to what we did with the Blue Line back over 10 years ago down in Bloomington. The cost estimate for this particular recommendation is 1.717 billion to 1.744 billion dollars, with an average daily ride in 2040 of 34,100 rides. A very strong project. Now you'll note that it puts us short of cutting $341 million. We've heard very loud and clear from the County's Transit Improvement Board that their investment in the project is $496 million. It left essentially a local gap in the project. What we heard today from the Corridor Management Committee was a very, very strong desire to commit local contributions from each of the partners along the corridor to help fill that gap. And I'll talk a little bit more about that gap here shortly. Key is to get those commitments by July 31st. As I think we mentioned here on the 24th, we are obligated to make a new start submittal FTA by August 3rd, and we need to demonstrate that we have the money to match their federal dollars. So before I jump into the financing gap that we have on the local side, just want to remind folks that we did cut major significant things out of the project, things that were desired by project partners, but are things in a lot of cases that can be dealt with in the future. And we'll come back in the future with essentially plan B for being able to pursue these items in the future post-ribbon cutting. There are different opportunities we can go after to get some of these elements back. But as a reminder, all of the scenarios reduce station furnishings by 50%, reduce station art by 100%, reduce landscaping by 75%. We made modifications to avoid significant relocations of property takings near the Shady Oak Station by shifting the platform and making track modifications. We've shrunk the footprint of the operation and maintenance facility above and beyond just simply shrinking the storage barn for the LRVs. We've actually been able to now save essentially one full property take in Hopkins at the operation and maintenance facility. In addition, we're going to reduce the light road vehicle fleet down by 5 vehicles.
Craig, just before we move off that slide, I just think it's important to point out to members that a couple of weeks ago we were talking about these options, and ending at Southwest Station didn't look mathematically possible at all. And it's a number of these items that either had been discovered or more work had been done to figure out that there's enough savings that we could get closer to getting to Southwest Station. I just think it's important to recognize that, both for the people here as well as for the public to know how much work went into finding those savings to really trim back the budget, so we were in a position to even see Southwest Station as a reality.
Very good point, Mr. Chair. So a little bit specifically about what's in the Southwest scenario. I previously mentioned we added back Penn Station from the conversation from last week. We added back Trail Bridge at Beltline. We've got several trail bridges on this project, or we had. We've added back this one at Beltline because it is leveraging outside federal dollars. The city of, actually Hennepin County and Three Rivers Park District has secured a federal grant that is paying for a bike trail tunnel under Wooddale, under Blake, and then a bridge extension off the bridge that we have proposed over Beltline. These are very busy crossings. They're very dangerous crossings with vehicular traffic. They actually received the federal grant because of some recent deaths that occurred at the Beltline crossing. So we added our bridge back in so that their funds can leverage that and extend the bridge across Beltline Boulevard. As I mentioned before, we're increasing a few parking rides, one specifically at Louisiana. We're essentially maxing out with the consent of the City of St. Louis Park to utilize what was previously designated as remnant property for redevelopment. We are going to use it to be able to provide additional capacity at that particular station to compensate for lower capacity at other stations. We are decreasing the parking rides at Beltline and Blake, converting what were proposed to be ramps down to smaller surface lots. We're adding back a parking ride at Shady Oak and actually adding more spaces than we had previously contemplated. Very similar to the Louisiana station. We're using that particular site to compensate for lower capacity at some of the other locations. So in the net gain, we're trying to maintain the parking ride supply and the access to parking ride as high as possible on this alignment. We're decreasing the parking rides at downtown Hopkins, City West, Opus in terms of the capacity, but there'll still be parking rides there. We're deferring the Edenbury Town Center station, and then we're eliminating the station and parking ride at Mitchell. To note, Hopkins made a major concession to shrink up the footprint of the Blake station. We have been pursuing joint development potential at 2 different locations, Beltline and Blake, and by not taking 2 additional properties because we're removing the ramp at Blake and going to a smaller surface lot, we're also, by making that move, giving up the ability to do joint development at that location. So what it looks like down at the far southwest of the end of the line, ending at Southwest Station, the existing bus hub, which was very important for us to get there, the amount of activity that already exists there and the facility that's already there, that's only 15 years old, was key to being able to leverage the investment we're bringing with the rail line to make the connection to that intermodal hub and be able to operate feeder bus service that today does not exist out of that hub using the existing facilities. As represented on the right side of the screen, you've got an empty circle that is the deferred town center location, so deferred for the time being in the project and for the duration of the project, but could be pursued as we did with American Boulevard Station on the blue line 10 years ago with the city of Wilmington. So a little bit about the financing piece. Since this project budget for this scenario is above 1.653 billion, this is what the funding sources look like for a project of 1.653. I'll back up to point out on this slide as I go through the discussion. Take the 90 million down in the lower right-hand corner. That is the gap essentially that we have to go to Southwest Station. That is made up of both federal and local funds, and I'll talk about that here on this subsequent slide. This slide is the $90 million gap that we have under ending in a Southwest scenario that I just outlined at a project budget of $1.744 billion. We've been showing all of these numbers in ranges, a high end of the range and a low end of the range, and that's because we've got a project that's at 40% design, yet we're taking elements out of that project that leave behind a hole that you need to understand what is going to be filled into that hole to make the project whole and complete. The designs are at a very fledgling level on those, so as we are advancing that, we're getting smarter about the costs associated with what the project would look like after you take that scope reduction out. We're now to a point where we're comfortable moving the low end of the range that we had been targeting up by $10 million. There's about a $25 million spread on the low end and high end of the range. And so we're making that adjustment here to bring that dollar amount now gap down to $80 million. The Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority has most of the linear corridor from Shady Oak Station all the way through about Royalston Station. And they have, that was going to be donated to the project at $0. We are now utilizing the value of that property as in-kind contribution against federal dollars in the tune of $30 million. So the in-kind value of the property brings dollar for dollar federal dollars, and that's what's represented by the 30 here. So we bring that gap down to basically $50 million. That $50 million gap that remains is 50% federal, 50% local. So we really have a $25 million gap on the local side of things, with the feds being willing to pick up the additional $25 million. How do you fill that $25 million gap? That's where a lot of the discussion occurred today after the desire was made known that the desire Port Management Committee was to go to Southwest Station and find a way to do that, acknowledging that we have realities with the County Transit Improvement Board and others who made firm commitments back last year to the project as they knew it at $1.65 billion. Hennepin County has pledged, as part of filling the gap, $8 million of environmental response funds, as well as community works funds. That leaves $17 million more to be filled by others. And there's commitments around the table by the partners to be able to make contributions to fill that $17 million by the end of the July month. And so that's where we sit today, is that there was a lot of commitments to explore this with their city council, since this is a relatively new concept. You've got one member of each of the project partners around the table at Quarter Management Committee. Obviously, they have to have their councils weigh in on this, but they felt comfortable that there's a way to get to Southwest Station and there's a way to fill this local gap. So maybe with that, I'll leave it to if Chair Denick would like to say some words on where things were left with Quarter Management.
Sure, yeah, I'm just do my best to fill in there. I think, just to orient everybody with these numbers, now it's kind of complicated, but we got to a point where we were, the goal of the group of getting to Southwest Station became abundantly clear that the gap was this $90 million. And so the majority of the time we spent was talking about that and how we fill that gap. Hennepin County brought forward this idea that was just proposed today, that their $30 million in value will then leverage $30 million in additional federal funds. So you can see, and then the $10 million from the scale of the low to the high. So you can see how that number kind of creeps down. You're sitting in your chair going, well, there's still a $25 million gap. That's when, I think McLaughlin, even Commissioner McLaughlin even said, we're going to start passing the hat here, and here's what Hennepin County is putting in, and offered up $8 million in support, and almost every city responded. Well, some cities talked about giving some land similar to Hennepin County, as what Eden Prairie is proposing to do. There are potential operational savings too that I've been talking with General Manager Lamb about that we're going to explore. So even though there's 17 million left to find, I can report back with confidence to this group that there's conversations about $7 to $10 million today. So that number to me is kind of in the single digits. It's I think the math we were doing after the meeting, it's around $5 million, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, kind of depending on how we explore this. And we do have a couple weeks until the end of July to sort this out. But that being said, we're responsible for this vote and for this position, so we really want to make sure we have a clear understanding about these funding commitments too. And Craig can talk a little bit about the process of filling out the federal application and how that really kind of locks in what is in the scope of the project. And so if we do come to a point in a couple of weeks and it becomes clear there's a little bit of a gap left, we may have to revisit that and may have to think about a thing or two that has to come out of the project. But we're essentially at the doorstep of this option.